All right, shalom, shalom, Israel, Most High in Christ bless. Good morning. I am Officer Akiem from New Orleans. All right, and this title, this history in the AM is slave ships in Assyria and Babylon. All right, during this class to show that in 1492 and 1619 was not the first time we went into slavery on ships. All right. So first, let's get the prophecy. All right, let's get the prophecy of the slave ships. Let's get what Moses prophesied that. All right, we're gonna start with Deuteronomy 28, verse 15. It says, "And it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee." So understand, going into slavery was a curse put on the Israelites. Why? For breaking God's commandments. So let's get that very last curse that Moses told us. All right. Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 68. It says, "And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee." Now that Egypt, right? Let's get that. We're going to use Deuteronomy 5 and 6 to explain that Egypt is not talking about, in that context right there, is not talking about the actual Egypt, what we were just coming out of. All right? Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 6. It says, "I am the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage." Okay? The house of bondage. So Egypt is the house of bondage, also meaning slavery. Okay? So let's go back to Deuteronomy chapter 28. It says, "And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt," meaning bondage or slavery, "again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it." Now that it is the land of Egypt, meaning we wasn't going to see Egypt again as a whole, as a people. When you read historically, we never went back into Egypt as a people. You understand? It says, "Thou shalt see it no more again, and there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you," meaning redeem you, save you from your slavery. Even today, we're still in slavery. Israel went through various captivities after captivities after captivities. All right? So today, we're going to get into when was this fulfilled. Moses prophesied this, all right? When was this fulfilled? The first time was not 1492, and it wasn't in 1619. All right? So now, when did this come to pass? Going to read some history. Of course, it's history in the AM. We're going to go to 2 Kings chapter 17. We're going to start at verse 7. When did this come to pass? Hence the title, slave ships, because we're talking about slave ships in Assyria and Babylon. All right, 2 Kings chapter 7, verse 7. It says, "For so it was that the children of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God, which had brought them up out of the land of Egypt from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and had feared other gods." We just read Deuteronomy 28:15 that if we didn't keep the commandments, that the curses will come upon us and overtake us. All right? Verse 8. "And walked in the statutes of the heathen, whom the Lord cast out before the children of Israel, and of the kings of Israel, which they had made. And the children of Israel did secretly those things that were not right against the Lord their God. And they built them high places in all their cities, from the tower of the watchman to the fenced cities." So this is the history. 2 Kings is recapping what was going on. All right. What happened around the time of after King Ahaz and them? What happened, from after King Solomon all the way on? What happened is recapping that history. Israel was in idolatry. Israel was serving other gods. Israel was building altars and high places and temples to other gods, which was breaking the first commandment, all right, in the 10 Commandments. Verse 10, and they set them up images and groves in every high hill and under every green tree. And there they burnt incense in all the high places, as did the heathen, whom the Lord carried away before them. Because when you read the history, all right, during the time of Moses and Joshua, when you read in Deuteronomy, when you read in the book of Joshua, the Lord told us through Moses, hey, listen, and through Joshua, we go into these lands. The Lord is going to drive out the Canaanites, the Hivites, so on and so forth, but don't go after their gods, all right? But that's exactly what we did. Where we at? Verse uh verse 11. And there they burnt incense in all the high places, and did as did the heathen, whom the Lord carried away before them, and wrought wicked things to provoke the Lord to anger. For they served idols, whereof the Lord had said unto them, Ye shall not do this thing. Yet the Lord testified against Israel and against Judah by all the prophets and by all the seers. Now, the important point that I want here is that it separates. It didn't mention Israel as one nation, and we're about to get into why. It said against Israel and against Judah, because Israel became split into two kingdoms. It says, yet the Lord testified against Israel and against Judah by all the prophets and by all the seers, saying, Turn ye from your evil ways, and keep my commandments and my statutes, according to all the law which I commanded your fathers, and which I sent to you by my servants the prophets. Notwithstanding, they would not hear, but hardened their necks, like to the neck of their fathers that did not believe in the Lord their God. Israel, we did not listen. We did not hearken unto the voice of the Lord. All right? Verse 15. And they rejected his statutes and his covenant that he made with their fathers, and his testimonies, which he testified against them. And they followed vanity and became vain, and went after the heathen that were round about them, concerning whom the Lord had charged them that they should not do like them. And they left all the commandments of the Lord their God, and made them molten images, even 2 calves, and made a grove, and worshiped all the host of heaven, and served Baal. So if you remember history, all right, if you remember what happened in First Kings, all right, we made them 2 molten images, them 2 molten calves. It says, verse 17. And they caused their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire, and used divination and enchantments, and sold themselves to do evil in the sight of the Lord, to provoke him to anger. So what Israel was doing is, instead of serving the one true God, we followed after the heathens. We started worshiping Molech. We started worshiping Baal. We started making molten images and worshiping physical things. All right, verse 18. Here's the point. Therefore, the Lord was very angry with Israel, and removed them out of his sight, and there was none left but the tribe of Judah only. So this is the history that you read that happened in 1 Kings chapter 12, when the nation of Israel split into 2. All right? This is when the nation of Israel split into 2 and became Israel and Judah. It says, also Judah kept not the commandments of the Lord their God, but walked in the statutes of Israel which they made. So Israel wasn't the only one in sin. Israel wasn't the only one in idolatry. It was the kingdom of Judah as well, which later on became Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. Okay? Verse 20. It says, and the Lord rejected all the seed of Israel and afflicted them and delivered them into the hand of spoilers until he had cast them out of his sight. So that's what we're reading right here. All right? That's what let me read verse 21 and 22 as well. Matter of fact, read down to 23 because this goes into the rest of the point. But the question is, all right, so we read that the Lord rejected all Israel and all Israel was cast out of his sight and went into captivity. Who went into slavery on ships first? Was it the kingdom of Israel, which we call Northern Kingdom, but it's the kingdom of Israel, right? Or was it the kingdom of Judah, which we call a Southern Kingdom? Who went into slavery on ships first? All right, let's find out. We got 2 Kings. We're still in chapter 17. We read verse 21 now. For he rent Israel from the house of David. That's the split. And they made Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, king. And Jeroboam drave Israel from following the Lord and made them sin a great sin. So when you read the history in 1 Kings, Jeroboam, he had Israel in heavy idolatry. And they, even still to this day, Israel haven't recovered from the sins of Jeroboam. And the kings after him did the same thing and the same thing and the same thing. All right? For the children of Israel walked in all the sins of Jeroboam, which he did. They departed not from them until the Lord removed Israel out of his sight, as he had said by all his servants, the prophets. So was Israel carried away out of their own land to Assyria unto this day. Notice, it says carried away unto Assyria, all right? Unto Assyria. So to answer the question, who went in slavery on ships first? It was Israel, or what we call Northern Kingdom. They went into slavery on ships first. Let's jump up to 2 Kings 17, verse 6. It says, in the 9th year of Hoshea the king of Assyria, in the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria, which is the capital of Ephraim, right, which was the head of the kingdom of Israel after the split. So this northern kingdom, right, in the 9th year of Hoshea the king of Assyria, took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria and placed them in Halah and in Habor by the river Gozan and in the cities of the Medes. So now let's get some history. Now we got this book. All right, let's pull it up. I got this book to show. I know we are a visual people. So the kingdom of Israel was carried away into the land of Assyria. Okay. Now, we're going to get this book. This book right here, Holman Quick Source, is Bible Atlas with charts and biblical reconstructions. All right. Now, let's go inside the book. Let me pull up the next image. We're going to go inside the book. Let's get some history on there, and let's show a map that's showing this carried away into the land of Assyria. All right? So now, let me get the book, and I'm going to read it. So as you see at the top, it says the fall of Samaria and deportation of the Israelites. And deportation of the Israelites. So now, if you look at the bottom, it actually has the 2 Kings chapter 5, 17 verse 5 through 7, where it's explaining, it gives an overview. It says, then the king of Assyria invaded the whole land, marched up to Samaria, and besieged it for 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria. That's what we read in verse 6. He deported the Israelites to Assyria and settled them in Halah and by the Habor, Gozan's river. All right. It says, and in the cities of the Medes. This disaster happened because the people of Israel had sinned against their God who had brought them out of the land of Egypt. Okay. And it says the power from the power of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and because they had worshiped other gods. So the point that I want y'all to notice is when you look to the left, okay, when you look to the left by Israel, by the circle where it was besieged, and you see Israel, where you see the red line, the red arrows, then when you pay attention to the green, that's Israel being carried away captive. Notice we had to cross the Sea of Galilee. We had to cross we had to cross the Euphrates River. We had to cross the what's that? The Bacchus. I can't make that one out. But we had to cross that river, and we had to cross the Habor River. We crossed the Tigris. We crossed the Lower Zab River. We crossed the Diala River. So we crossing these waterways, all right, which is the point I want you to see, is that's what it's talking about when it says carried away. When it says carried away captive. So Israel, the northern kingdom, the kingdom of Israel, the kingdom of Ephraim, they went into slavery on ships first. Yes, we were on slave ships. Deuteronomy 28:68 came to pass. Guess what? During the time of Assyria. During the time of Assyria, Deuteronomy 28:68 came to pass. All right? So that's when they went into slavery on ships first. Now, let's deal with Judah, because remember, we read in 2 Kings 17. I'm going to read it again. Let me see. That was verse 20. 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 20. And the Lord rejected all the seed of Israel and afflicted them and delivered them into the hand of spoilers until he had cast them out of his sight. So we just read about the kingdom of Israel. Now let's read about Judah. All right, we're going to Jeremiah chapter 52. We're going to start at verse 4. Let's read about Judah going into captivity. Let's read about Judah going into slavery on ships. Like I said, it just wasn't just the time of 1492, the transatlantic slave trade in 1619, and the sub-Saharan slave trade and all that. That wasn't it. We went into slavery on ships before that. We just read in Assyria. Now let's get Babylon. Esau took all of the captivities that we've been into prior, from Egypt all the way on up, and just combined them together. That's all Esau did, and just repeated it. All right? This is Jeremiah chapter 52. We're going to start at verse 4. All right? We're going to do some reading. Jeremiah 52, verse 4. And it came to pass in the 9th year of his reign, in the 10th month, in the 10th day of the month, that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came, he and all his army, against Jerusalem, and pitched against it, and built forts round about it. So the city was besieged until the 11th year of King Zedekiah. So this is taking place when King Zedekiah was the king. All right? He wasn't a righteous king. Remember, he was the same king that was rebellious. He locked Jeremiah up, so on and so forth. So we're going to read about what happens to him as well. Verse 6. And in the 4th month, in the 9th day of the month, the famine was sore in the city, so that there was no bread for the people of the land, because the city was besieged. I understand what besieged is. Besieged is when the city is surrounded and nothing is able to go in, nothing is able to come out. That's a war tactic to starve out the inhabitants of that land. So guess what? They just wait them out. It's only but so long your supplies could last, your food could last, your water supply, so on and so forth. Then after a while, that cut off, you get weak, and that's when the enemy come in. So 70 AD wasn't the only time we was besieged. We read about it in Assyria. Now we're reading about it during the time of Babylon. Verse 7. Then the city was broken up, and all the men of war fled, and went forth out of the city by night by the way of the gate between the two walls, which was by the king's garden. Now the Chaldeans were by the city round about, and they went by the way of the plain. All right, let me read on. Verse 8. But the army of the Chaldeans pursued after the king and overtook Zedekiah in the plains of Jericho, and all his army was scattered from him. Then they took the king. Verse 9. Then they took the king and carried him up unto the king of Babylon into Riblah in the land of Hamath, where he gave judgment upon him. So we read about Zedekiah being captured and taken, and him being carried over. All right? Verse 11. Let's read about the judgment he got. Then he put out the eyes of Zedekiah. So his eyes was plucked out. It says, then he put out the eyes of Zedekiah, and the king of Babylon bound him in chains and carried him to Babylon and put him in prison to the day of his death. So that's the fate and the history that happened with Zedekiah. Verse 12. Now, in the 5th month, in the 10th day of the month, which was the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, so some time had went by. All right. At first, we was in, when you read in verse 4, it says it came to pass in the 9th year of his reign. So 10 years then went by. Okay. Now, verse 12 again. In the 5th month, in the 10th day of the month, which was the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, which served the king of Babylon, into Jerusalem. So Nebuchadnezzar's captain of his army came to Jerusalem, verse 13, and burned the house of the Lord, and the king's house, and all the houses of Jerusalem, and all the houses of great men, burned he with fire. So this is when the temple was first destroyed. We know when we read the history during the time of Ezra and Nehemiah and Joshua and Zerubbabel, where the temple and the wall had to be rebuilt. Guess what? That was because of the history we're reading right now, where it was destroyed and burned down to the ground during the time of Babylon. Verse 14. And all the army of the Chaldeans that were with the captain of the guard break down all the walls of Jerusalem round about. So this is Israel. This is Judah. This is the kingdom of Judah getting judged, all right, getting besieged, and the kingdom and the city getting burned to the ground during the time of Babylon. All right. Now let's jump down to verse 27. Now, Jeremiah chapter 52, verse 27. It says, and the king of Babylon smote them and put them to death in Riblah in the land of Hamath. Thus Judah was carried away captive out of his own land. So again, and I got another image, all right, with another book that we're going to get. But guess what? Now we're reading about Judah being carried out of his own land, the same way like Israel was during the time of Assyria. Now we're reading about it happening with Judah during the time of Babylon. We got to understand what it's saying when it's saying carried away. That's not talking about they were walking on feet like the Trail of Tears that we read about, all right, in more modern day history. No, we are reading about slave ships, all right? We're going to read on some more. Verse 28. This is the people whom Nebuchadrezzar carried away captive in the 7th year, 3,000 Jews, 3 and 20. In the 18th year of Nebuchadrezzar, he carried away captive from Jerusalem 832 persons. In the 23rd year of Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carried away captives of the Jews 745 persons. All persons were 4,600. So again, let's get the image. We're going back to the Holman's Quick Source book. All right, let's get this image right here. It says Jewish exiles in Babylonia. Now, I understand it says Jewish, but it's not necessarily Jewish. It was the Jews. All right. The enemy did write this book. All right. So now, what I want you to pay attention to is, again, the same thing. Let's look at the red line. Well, we started in Judah. All right. We started in Judah, in Jerusalem, and then we were carried away. It's outlining it for us. Guess what? We had to cross the Orontes River. Okay? We had to cross the Euphrates River. All right? We had the Chebar River. We had these different rivers that we had to cross to get into Babylon. These were waterways where we were traveling through. So this is on ships, not on feet. So now, we already answered the question, who went into slavery first on ships? It was the kingdom of Israel during the time of Assyria, followed by the kingdom of Judah, a.k.a. the southern kingdom. Now, let's get some more on that, though. Now we got better context when we read Psalms chapter 137. We got to pay attention to words. It says carried away, carried away. Let's get Psalms chapter 137. We're going to start verse 1. It says, by the rivers of Babylon. That's the key right there. It says, by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. Yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. Zion is Jerusalem. All right? Zion is Israel. That's Zion. It's just another name. So then we went from Zion to by the rivers of Babylon. It says, we hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof. That's trees, right? It says, for there they that carried us away captive required of us a song, and they that wasted us required of us mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion's. Okay, so again, we read, it says, they that carried us away. How they carried us away? On slave ships by the rivers of Babylon. So we went into slavery on ships. We went into captivity on ships during Babylon as well. Okay? Let's just read the rest of this, Psalms 137. It says, how shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? It says, if I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget not her cunning. Meaning, let us not forget our God. Let us not forget our laws, statutes, and commandments. Let us not forget how to live. Okay? Verse 6. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. All right? Meaning speaking. If I prefer not Jerusalem above my chief joy. Now, here's some more history. It says, remember, O Lord, the children of Edom in the day of Jerusalem, who said, race it, even to the foundation thereof. So the children of Edom, guess what? They were in agreement. They were right there in cahoots with Babylon, egging them on to destroy us, to destroy the land. Because they've always had that perpetual hatred against us. It says, O daughter of Babylon. That's what it called Esau. Because remember, the children of Edom, Esau, what we know today, the so-called white man, they are the daughter of Babylon. They are Babylon the Great. Why? Because they have the same. Matter of fact, let's get it. Revelation chapter 11 Revelation chapter 11 and verse 8. It says, "And their dead bodies," talking about Israel, "shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where our Lord was also crucified." So that's part of it, where they took from Egypt. They also took from Sodom. All right. They took from these places. All right. Now, let's get Revelation. They just borrowed and grouped. They studied all of the different captivities, and then they grouped it together. That's why this one is the worst captivity. This one is the worst captivity. Let's get Revelation. Bear with me a second. Revelation chapter. Let me see. Verse 5. Revelation chapter 17, verse 5. Here we go. It says, "And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth." When you read the history, this is going into the so-called white man. All right? This is the beast that has 7 heads. All right? Those 7 heads is all Edomite nations. So let's go back. Let's go back to Psalms 137, verse 8. It says, "O daughter of Babylon, who ought to be destroyed, happy shall he be that rewarded thee as thou hast served us. Happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stones." So this is all the history that we were reading when we go back to Jeremiah. We can read about this history, Jeremiah 49, Jeremiah chapter 51. So now, what else? Like I said, Edom, they copied this. They saw what Assyria, with Sodom, with Egypt, what Assyria, what Babylon did, what Persia and Media did, what Greece did, what Rome did. And then when it got up to the time of America, they did the same thing. All right? They did the same thing. So now, let's go back and read Deuteronomy 28:68 again. It says, "And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt," meaning slavery or bondage, "again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it," talking about the land of Egypt, "no more again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen," meaning slave men and slave women, "and no man shall buy you," meaning redeem you or save you from that captivity. Because we went from captivity from Assyria, all right? And although that was predominantly the kingdom of Israel, there were some Jews that went. Just like we went from Assyria to Babylon. In Babylon, guess what? It was predominantly the kingdom of Judah, but not only, it was remnants of the kingdom of Israel in there too. All right? So then we went from there from the Persian Mede captivity. We was going from captivity to captivity to captivity. All right? Then after that, it was Greece. Then it was Rome. And then we have today the various captivities throughout the lands. All right? The Columbus's so-called conquest of paradise in 1492. We have 1619. We have the 1500s, the sub-Sahara slave trade. All right? We have even on the eastern side of the world, the slave trade. Well, we were going from the east coast of Africa, and then we were going to India and China and so on and so forth. All right? Scattered throughout all of those places. So, all right, now let's deal with some of the more modern day America. Let's deal with that. Matter of fact, I mentioned the sub-Sahara slave trade, right? Let's get Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 2. All right? Let's get some prophecies. It says, Lift up thine eyes unto the high places, and see what thou hast not been lined with, and the ways hast thou set for them, as the Arabian in the wilderness. And thou hast polluted the land with thy whoredoms and with thy wickedness. So guess what? Yes, this happened back then, but it also happened during the sub-Saharan slave trade. Okay? I didn't pull a map for that, but it shows the different captivities that we went into. Okay? Um what else? What else? What else? Let's get let's go back to oh, okay. Let me look. Let me look. Let me look. Look at my notes. All right, so we covered the slave ships in Babylon, okay, and we covered the slave ships in Assyria. So now let's get the years. Let's get the timelines of that. Okay, let's get the timelines of Assyria, Babylon, and so on and so forth. Let me see if I can get that image up as well. See if I can get the image up while we get that. So the Assyria captivity, we know was when. Oh my bad. The Assyria captivity, we know was during 722 BC, okay, all the way up to 605 BC. That was the Assyria captivity. I'm looking for the image. All right. And then also, see if I can find that image real quick. Bear with me 1 second. Bear with me 1 second. I have it somewhere. I forget it. All right, Assyrians. That captivity was 722 BC to 605 BC. All right. Now let's get some more history on that Assyrian captivity. Let's get the Book of Tobit. Okay. Let's get Tobit, chapter 14. We're going to read verse 15. It says, "But before he died, he heard of the destruction of Nineveh, which was taken by Nebuchadnezzar and Ahasuerus, and before his death, he rejoiced over Nineveh." So we read about before Tobit died, he heard about Israel going into captivity. All right. But Tobit was in the Assyrian captivity. Okay. Let's get Tobit chapter 1, verse 1. The books of the words of Tobit, son of Tobiel, the son of Anael, the son of Aduel, the son of Gabael, of the seed of Asael, of the tribe of Naphtali. So Tobit was Naphtali. It says, who in the time of Enamasar, king of the Assyrians, that's the same thing as Shalmaneser, all right, was led captive out of Thisbe, which is at the right hand of that city, which is called properly Naphtali in the Galilee above Asher. So guess what? That's the Assyrian captivity. That's another place we read about Tobit going into. So Tobit was in that number that went into captivity during the time of Assyria. All right. Let's get Zephaniah chapter 2 and verse 13. It's getting some more on the Assyrian captivity and places where you can go and read about it. Excuse me. All right. Zephaniah chapter 2, verse 13. And he will stretch out his hand against the north and destroy Assyria and will make Nineveh a desolation and dry like a wilderness. Why would judgment come on Assyria? Because guess what? They will get destruction for bringing the children of Israel into captivity. So now, let's get Babylon. Remember, Babylon was right after Assyria. So we had Assyria 722 BC to 605 BC. Guess what? We have Babylon from approximately 605 to 606 BC, okay, all the way up to 539 BC. So now, let's get a little bit on that. Let's get Judith chapter 1 and verse 1. Let's get the book of Judith chapter 1 and verse 1. There we go. It says, in the 12th year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, who reigned in Nineveh, because he took over some, you understand the history, you understand the geography, right? Nebuchadnezzar basically took over all of the same lands that Assyria had. He expanded his kingdom, all right? It says, in the 12th year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, who reigned in Nineveh, the great city, in the days of Arphaxad, which reigned over the Medes in Ecbatane, also built in Ecbatane walls round about the stones hewn 3 cubits broad and 6 cubits long, and made the height of the wall 70 cubits, and the breadth thereof 50 cubits. All right? So, again, we're reading about when the Babylonian captivity started to usher in. We read Judith 1 and 1 that gives the introduction, all right, to Nebuchadnezzar and his beginning to expand. Now let's get the book of Daniel. We're going to get the book of Daniel chapter 1 verse 1. Daniel went into captivity under Babylon. All right, Daniel chapter 1 verse 1. It says, in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it. So that's the history we read about earlier. It says, and the Lord gave Joachim, king of Judah, into his hands, which part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasure into the treasure house of his God. All right. So we're gonna jump. To verse 6. It says, now among these were of the children of Judah Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So that's Daniel and what we also know as the 3 holy children. All right. So now let's jump to where is it? I want the part. Bear with me 1 second. Chapter 2 is about the dream. I don't want the dream. Let me just read verse 7. It says, unto whom the prince of the eunuch gave names. For he gave unto Daniel the name of Belteshazzar, and to Hananiah of Shadrach, and to Mishael of Meshach, and to Azariah of Abednego. So when they went into captivity under Babylon, their names was changed. All right. So now, and let's just read one more thing. Let's read one more thing. One more thing. Let me go back. That was Psalms Let's read one more scripture. One more scripture. Psalms chapter 137. I want to read verse 1 again. It says, by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. Yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. Jump to verse 3. For there they that carried us away captives required of us a song, that they that wasted us required of us mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. So again, that's when we went into captivity under Babylon on slave ships. And let me just reiterate. Let's go back. 2 Kings 17. Gonna read verse 6 again. All right. Then we're gonna close out with that. 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 6. It says, in the 9th year of Hoshea, king of Assyria, took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria and placed them in Halah and in Habor by the river of Gozan and in the cities of the Medes. So again, those two verses, coupled with the other history and the maps that we went over, shows, guess what? We went into captivity on slave ships during the time of Assyria and during the time of Babylon. All right. So again, I am Officer Akiem, and that was History in the AM. And with that, I say shalom.